Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. This is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. We have Judge and Donnelly to thank for this. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. Also, please go to pleasedoyourjob.com site and please sign the petition. That's pleasedoyourjob.com and sign the petition. I have a return guest on. I have Brian Vukadinovich back on. He has last been on the podcast, season 4, episodes 69 and 99. And we are going to discuss the fact that there are criminal statutes that pertain to judges that can be used to make judges accountable for violating the laws of the land when they violate their oath of office. But law enforcement chooses to look the other way and not utilize the statutes, and thereby allows corrupt judgment to not only keep their freedom, but also remain on the bench to continue their corruptions. And we will discuss some possible solutions to this problem and some things that the public can do to, in effect, clean up these courts. I welcome you to the podcast, Brian Vukadinovich. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, Marianne. How are you? Good to be back on with you.
Oh, it's great. Great to have you on. Thank you for coming back on. I'm going to show a copy of your book because people have been asking about it. Here it is.
Oh,
and I will have that posted in the podcast notes as well.
Thank you.
So what do you think about these? You know, it just doesn't end. These judges make these bad rulings. Nothing happens.
No, it doesn't end. And in fact, it's getting worse, actually. I'm sure that people have been watching on the news here as of late for actually a pretty good while now. The developments that's been going on in the U.S. Supreme Court, particularly with Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. And we need to be focusing in on that situation very closely because what's going on is clearly our Supreme Court is basically rotten to the core. And I say that with no hesitation because it's out there in open view right now in front of us. A lot of us understand things that are going on in the local courts and the district courts that some of us might be involved in some way or another, and we have some feelings about things that are going on there. But people need to understand that it's just not a problem in the local courts; it's also a problem in the higher courts, including the Supreme Court. For example, Clarence Thomas, and I'm sure everything I'm going to say here, people have already seen on the news. He's been, for over 20 years now, he's been treated to expensive gifts, luxury vacations with a friend of his, a billionaire named Harlan Crow. Took just not too long ago, took him on a vacation. It was worth, the news media reported it was worth about $500,000. He takes him on this fancy jet, wines and dines them, and there was a picture of him shown with him and some of his other cronies smoking cigars outside. And then later on, we find out that Harlan Crow actually had had some interest in front of the Supreme Court that Clarence Thomas had ruled in favor of. And then also there's reporting about how Clarence Thomas bought, or how Harlan Crow bought Clarence Thomas's house, fixed it up, allows Clarence Thomas's mother to live in there rent free, and so forth. And it's just horrible. And then we have Samuel Alito. We're finding out he's doing much the same. He took a trip to a more than $1,000 a night luxury resort in Alaska on a private jet.
Nice.
Gratis of Paul Singer, a billionaire hedge fund manager and a Republican donor. And it would have cost, the news reports stated that it would have cost Alito $100,000 for a one-way trip. And Alito afterward voted in Singer's favor in a dispute involving Singer's hedge fund and the nation of Argentina. And the hedge fund then was paid $2.4 billion. So clearly our Supreme Court, at least certain members of the Supreme Court, clearly Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are bought and sold. There's no question about that. Now the question is, what are we going to do about that? And the answer looks like not much. After these reports came out, the Senate Judiciary Committee, through Dick Durbin, who's the chairman, they requested that John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, come in and answer questions about all this, because Roberts has been opposing an ethics bill for the Supreme Court. So the Judiciary Committee would like to know about the situation, about all this money being, these luxury vacations and so forth, being funneled into these two characters. And Thomas basically said, hey, go fly a kite. I don't have to come in. I don't have to answer to anybody. That's the problem we're having in this country right now. When we get to the point, we have to remember now, and not forget, ever forget, that the judiciary is a form of government. We have three forms of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. So the other two, we have checks and balances. We can vote those people out. We can vote them in. We can't do any of that with the Supreme Court. So something needs to change here. And I've got some I think are some potential solutions to the problem. And I'll throw those in here in a little bit. But one thing that I would really like to focus in on today is something that, I'm watching this Sheldon Whitehouse. He's a senator from I believe he's in one of the eastern states. I'm not sure if it's Connecticut, but he's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he likes to get out in front of the TV cameras and talk about Clarence Thomas and Alito. And he likes to make a lot of bold statements, and his statements are true. And same thing with Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin has never saw a TV camera that he didn't like. He likes to get in front of these cameras and put on a big show. But to me, it looks like all talk and no action, because these people actually have a lot of power. They have subpoena power. John Roberts tells them to fly a kite. I'm not coming in. Then you can subpoena him. I don't know how many times I hear people say nobody is above the law. Well, that's a joke.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, it's just
they literally are.
And so then subpoena. You have subpoena power, do it. Make them come in and testify under oath. And they won't do it. So, I take a lot of stuff that Sheldon Whitehouse and Dick Durbin, I just take that without a grain of salt. It's just a big show as far as I'm concerned. Now, I hear them talk about, well, these are criminal activities. These are crimes that they're doing by taking this money and these expensive vacations and then ruling in favor of these corporations and so forth. Well, you know what? Then put up or shut up. If you really believe it's a crime, you don't need to just go in front of the TV cameras and say it's a crime. Do something about it. Why aren't you calling the Attorney General of the United States into the Senate Judiciary Committee and asking him questions about this? What is he doing about this? Why is he not prosecuting these apparent criminals? In White House's own words, criminals. So there's one thing that I'd like to point out that people probably don't realize there are specific federal statutes that pertain to judges. And one of them I'd like to quote, there's several of them, but there's one that I'm going to focus in on here. It's 18 U.S. Code Section 4. And here's what it says. Whoever having knowledge of the actual commission of a felony cognizable by a court of the United States conceals and does not as soon as possible make known the same to some judge or other person in civil or military authority under the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. Well, here we go. We have John Roberts, who has this information, who has been called in, asked to come in and testify, and he refused to do so. So he definitely has knowledge about what's going on, and he not only fails to report it when asked about to produce information about it, he refuses to provide it. So it would seem that he qualifies under this code for criminal conduct, in addition to the two violators for sure, Clarence Thomas and Alito. So my question is to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, why isn't he utilizing this code? And this code could be utilized up and down the judiciary. Every time a federal judge, and I'm speaking about federal judges here now. Now I'm not giving the state judges any pass here at all, because boy, there's a lot of problems there as well, for sure. But those are kind of handled state by state. So, but the federal code applies to all of them. Now, one of the things that we could do is, there's several things. For one, utilize the code, the federal code, that actually can imprison a judge for not only actually being involved in the conduct, but by hiding that conduct, by concealing it. So we could utilize that code. It's there for us, but it's not happening. Now, another thing that we could put a lot of pressure on these federal judges and Supreme Court justices in one way alone. Now, we all pretty much know that judges retire at full pension.
Yeah.
Now, and a lot of people don't realize, I've spoken to a lot of people about this, they don't realize this. Judges, when they retire, they retire for the rest of their life at whatever their salary was the last year of them being a judge. Most of them they make well over $200,000 a year. It depends on what level they're at. So let's say they retire at $230,000 a year. That's what they get for the rest of their life as a pension, $230,000 a year. That's just an example. Now, the Constitution does not require that. The Constitution does allow them to be on there for life, but the Constitution does not dictate that they receive full pension. The judges retire at full pension by Congress's permission, not the Constitution. Congress put into play the Judiciary Act of 1869, giving federal judges and Supreme Court justices the option to retire with a full pension set at the salary of the judge at the time of retirement, with the condition that the judge be at least 70 years old and have 10 years of service on the federal bench. Now, who in the country gets a pension like that? You can work for 10 years and you'll get a pension the rest of your life for whatever the salary was at the time who gets that?
No.
My point is, this is a tool that Congress could use. It could change that. Because of all the stuff that's going on that we're watching before our very eyes, Congress should come in and say, you know what? You guys have been on the gravy train for far too long, and we're going to take some of that gravy train away from you until you start behaving and acting in accordance with the law. So you will no longer get a pension for the rest of your life for the same salary. You will be treated the way the rest of the American working public is treated. Congress can do that, but they won't. And another thing clearly that could happen, that has happened only a few times in the country, is that federal judges, just like we always hear about, when the presidents get impeached and all those kinds of things, but federal judges get impeached as well. It's happened a few times, not very often, but a few times. So they could be impeached. Hey, you guys are taking money and you're taking expensive vacations, taking gifts, and then you're ruling in front of these corporations. You're out of here. Okay, we're going to impeach you.
Mhm.
And all Congress has to do, the House of Representatives, they have impeachment proceedings, take a vote. If they have enough votes, they pass it on to the United States Senate. They hold hearings, and then they impeach them. They can get rid of them. Why are we not doing these things and putting up? Why is Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse? Why aren't they slamming their fists on the table and demanding that these things be done? Demanding that Clarence Thomas and Alito and even John Roberts, I'm sorry to have to say, should all be prosecuted under the federal code and convicted and put in prison. They're criminals. This is criminal conduct. White collar crimes in this country are prosecuted on a daily basis. We always hear about the bank robbers and the murderers and all of those kinds of things. But there's a lot of white collar crimes, they call them. Okay, people stole money, they embezzled money. Well, these are white collar crimes that these justices are doing here. So they should be prosecuted for this. And we have laws for it. We have a Department of Justice that is equipped to do it. But what we don't have the people in place, in power, that are willing to do it. So they play along with the game, basically, in the end. So that's a big problem that we have in the country. And by the way, I know a lot of people have heard of the RICO Act for sure. It involves patterns of conduct when people are involved in certain crimes and so forth. So RICO is also in play here with these statutes as well. I don't know, it's just very disappointing.
Yes, it is.
Now, if I could, I hope I'm not boring the audience too much here, but I think this information is actually important. Okay, so another thing for the people to understand is that the law is very clear that, and it's stated right under Supreme Court's precedent, that when a judge acts as a trespasser of the law, when a judge does not follow the law, the judge loses subject matter jurisdiction, and the judge's orders are void, of no legal force or effect. That's a Supreme Court case under Scherer versus Rhodes. And then it was defined that when a state officer acts under a state law in a manner violated of the federal Constitution, he comes into conflict with the superior authority of the Constitution, and he is in that case stripped of his official or representative character and is subjected in his person to the consequence of his individual conduct. That's in the Scherer versus Rhodes case. So what that means is, in a nutshell, what that means is when a federal judge violates the Constitution, he is subject to the consequences, criminal and civil consequences of his conduct. So when the judge raises his hand and he swears to uphold the Constitution, and he turns around and he plays games, he plays favoritism, he rules on one side because he's got some kind of, he doesn't like perhaps one side or the other for one reason or another, political or personal or whatever the case might be. He's obligated to follow the law and the Constitution. When the judge does not do that, he violates the Constitution. So we have these Supreme Court decisions, we have the Supreme Court statutes, but what we don't have is we don't have judges being held accountable.
Right.
So what do we do about that? I'll ask you to throw your thoughts in on it, Marianne. What do you think?
I've tried to hold people accountable. They tell you to complain to the Judiciary Board, write letters there. Nothing's ever done. They all cover each other's rear ends. My federal magistrate who handled my case he openly admitted that he did not read my exhibits and ruled them irrelevant and dismissed the case. And that's when I took it to the appeals court, where they entertained it for 3 to 4 months, and then they dismissed the case because apparently when parents' rights are violated and their children's rights are violated, it just doesn't matter. I don't know
No,
what to say.
no, it doesn't matter. In fact, there's a lot of people. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people and I've read a lot of stuff. I read a lot of cases. In fact, I wrote about a lot of this stuff in my book, actually. That there's nothing that happens. Whenever you report these things, it's basically a secret society, and we've talked about that in the past. There's absolutely, in fact, when you file a misconduct complaint against a federal judge, you are told up front, I know because I've done it, you are told up front that you are not to discuss the case at
Oh, I
all.
just did.
No, well, I don't worry about that at all. I don't worry. Well, you talked in general. You didn't really, I mean, you talked in general terms, but honestly, I don't worry about that at all. I did it, and I actually discussed it in my book. If they want to come after me, they know where I live. They can come here, and then we'll deal with it. If they want to go to court over the issue, I'm happy to go to court and speak to a jury about this. To me, that's a First Amendment violation. That law needs to be struck down for sure. You have evidence of corruption by a judge. You file a misconduct. When people get arrested, they put their names in the newspapers before they ever have a hearing in their case. So
Right.
it's okay for the public at large to know who's being arrested out there before they're even found guilty of anything. But when it comes to judges, oh no, you can't even say their name. You can't discuss it. Not happening. With me, I filed a complaint against Judge Michael S. Caney. Clearly, there was a big problem with him fixing the case. It was reported by another judge who I became friends with, Judge Posner, Richard Posner. I filed a complaint, and they, of course, swept it under the rug. It's sitting right now in Washington, D.C. They choose not to do anything because they do not want the public to know how corrupt the judiciary is. So this is a problem. Now, what can we do about it? All right, again, now we have a House Judiciary Committee, we have a Senate Judiciary Committee, and those people have a lot of power. They actually are the ones with the power. They can call these judges in, they can investigate, they can ask questions, and they can impeach if they choose to do so. Now, the problem is when you contact those people, they just blow you off. They do just like the judges do. They just blow you off. They don't want to hear from you, because then it becomes political. Then, oh, well, if I go after this judge, then the other party is going to go after me and so forth. It always ends up, with the politics in the end with it. So, but you know what? People shouldn't stand for it. Write to those people, write letters to them, call them, bombard them with emails until they get to let it down. Every time they walk in their office, you want those receptionists to tell them, hey, man, we had 500 calls this week about this judge here. We got to do something here. They're not going to let up. And until people start doing that, nothing's going to happen. We need to have something happen at that level, and it's not going to unless people actually get very active with this.
And I think people aren't getting active with it because they've been through so much in the court system. They're just exhausted and they just want to rest and just walk away from it.
Of course, yeah, absolutely, and they get bullied. I mean, basically, I mean, a lot of these judges are bullies. You get in there in front of them, and sometimes they don't even want to hear from you. If you try to ask them a question or if you make a statement, they get real upset about it. Hey, what are you doing in here? You don't even have a lawyer. And I'm talking about the pro se's now, and even with a lawyer, a lot of times if it's just something, if they don't like the issue or the people involved or whatever, and then they just they're on this high pedestal here, and then they need to be knocked off of that pedestal a few notches here. So people just and then people, for example, as I said, when I filed that misconduct complaint against Caney, the very first thing that the clerk of the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in Chicago, then he sends me a letter and he says, you can't discuss this case. You can't do it. Here's the statute. Okay. Well, and I, and I asked him, I want to know the names of the judges who were involved in sweeping this thing under the rug. I want their names. There was an order issued here where it was swept under the rug. I want to know the names. They won't even tell me the names of the judges. That's how corrupt this situation is with judges. They've got it all how they want it. Everything's in secret. They help each other out, the buddy system. And then on top of it, you're told you better not talk about this.
Yeah.
Well, they can read about it in my book. And as I said, if they wanna bring a charge against me, have at it. I'll be ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't know I'm just so disappointed with all of them. Because as we were talking earlier, you got the Supreme Court judges and the corruption's there, but it just gets murkier as we go down to the lower courts. And that's where it's really even just as sickening, if not worse.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I'll tell you, I've been focusing a little bit more on the stuff that's going on in family courts, and been talking with Lee Grenade a lot. I think you had her on the show here, and she's doing a heck of a job in South Carolina, exposing a lot of things that's going on in the family court system in South Carolina. And what I've read going on out there, I mean, it's going on all over the country. But Lee has been out there. She's been a warrior. She's out there and she's fighting the good fight. We need more Lee Grenades out in the country, actually. And that's my point here. We need to have more activists like Lee out there. She's not afraid. She goes out. She'll go out and do interviews. She confronts these judicial miscreants, and she asks a lot of questions, demands answers, and that's what we need. I mean, I'm doing my part. I'm doing a lot of writing on my blogs, on my website with my blogs. I write letters to the editor. I've written op-eds. You're doing your part. I've written a book. You're doing these shows. You're doing your part. And we need more people to take an active role. And yes, I understand that they're afraid. They get intimidated. But just think about back in the day how it was with women's suffrage. Back in the day, you can't vote. You have to walk behind the man when you're, and all of that kind of stuff. Those were actually laws. The law when Rosa Parks got arrested for refusing to go to the back of the bus, she was frightened to death to do that. And I'm sure her friends and family told her, don't do that. It's too dangerous. And she decided, no, it's too important. That law is unjust. And who knows, today, it might be like that today had it not been for Rosa Parks. My point is sometimes we have to bite the bullet and be brave and do what we have to do, even if that's what the law is. We have to say, and remember, women couldn't vote. That was the law. So we had to have, mass demonstrations and protests to fight that law and get that law changed. And we have to do the same thing here. We have to have protests, demonstrations, and signal to the judiciary that we're sick and tired of it, we're fed up with it, and we're going to start taking action. Now, I am not in any way suggesting that anybody go out and do, physical harm and, to people or to property or anything like that. I'm not about that. I'm about doing things. There's a certain way to do things the right way. So you contact your representatives, state, federal. You register your concerns. You demand meetings. One thing that just boggles my mind, we have 365 days in the year. And it would seem that the House and the Senate Judiciary Committees could take at least one day out of the 365 days, just one day, and hold hearings and let people, the public, come in and talk about things that have happened in their case with particular judges. I mean, just one day, it could enlighten them like, whoa, this is really going on? If they would just do that one day and have several people, and they can go in and they can get the record of the cases and see what's happening, and they can call those judges in and give them their day in court as well. Hey, listen, we heard this is going on in your court. We have some questions for you. Just like the Senate asked John Roberts to come in, they can ask district court judges to come in, appellate judges to come in. Hey, we've got some reports about you that that don't look very good here, and we got some questions here. So those are the kinds of things that could happen. And if people would put the public pressure on, we could actually make some advances. We could make some gains here with this. But it's not going to happen unless the people start getting active with this.
I noticed that
unfortunately.
Right. I know it's like in some of these, meetings, public will be allowed to speak, but they only have 2 minutes. And how do you explain a multifaceted case in 2 minutes?
And then a lot of times what they do is they'll give them 2 minutes, and then when they're speaking, they'll butt in while they're speaking, and just to throw them off, and use up 1 minute of the 2 minutes, and then it's time's up. Yep. And they butted in and used a minute, half the time up themselves, just by butting in and throwing something out. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that what's going on. And honestly, I mean, we can't really cry too much about it, because what are we doing about it as a people? I mean, we have a few people out there that are, you're doing your part, Lee Grenade's doing her part, and there's a lot of other people doing their parts. Tom Scott in California, who I know, is doing his part. I'm trying to do my part. There's a lot of people. There's too many for me to, to even mention here by name, but there's not enough. There's not enough. People are on social media a lot. I mean, on Twitter, if you go on Twitter and you can see all the horror stories that are going on in the courts, but those people need to understand that that's not really getting a whole lot done, just complaining to each other. It's always good to have a shoulder to cry on. That's nice, but that's not going to get you anywhere. You have to take that energy and put it in the appropriate way. Contact those representatives, let them hear from you, write letters to the editor, contact news media. Now, the news media, I'm a little disappointed in as well. I mean, I know they have a lot of information. I've provided a lot of information to certain news media outlets, and I don't know what the deal is with the news media. If it's gotten to the point now where just like what Clarence Thomas and Alito's doing, if they've been bought and sold as well, with things, with the politics of things. I know back in the day, I used to see a lot of things on the news that they would write about corruption. I don't know, many people in your audience might have heard about Operation Greylord in Chicago, in Cook County, Illinois, Chicago, back in the 80s. That was reported all over the country, where the feds actually did a sting operation with the judges in Cook County, which is basically Chicago, and then they sent people in with wires, and they taped these judges and taking bribes, and put a lot of them in prison and so forth. But they quit doing that. I have not seen a federal sting operation since of that magnitude, and I have to wonder why. It's pathetic that we're putting up with this in this country. We don't need to. We shouldn't be, but we are, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, to say the least. After my appeal even failed, people were saying, why aren't you pursuing this more? It's like, you have no idea the work I did just to get this far. Do it yourself. Right. You can't find an attorney that will even represent you, even though you are within your statutes of limitation. It's like they don't want to go into federal court, big babies. I don't know what the problem is.
Well, the problem is, if I go in there, and this is a very important issue that's going to affect not only this particular litigant, but it can have reaching effects to other litigants as well on this issue. And then that lawyer is basically going against the system, and then the judges don't like it, the system doesn't like it, the government doesn't like it, And then, well, I can't do this because then I'm going to suffer as a lawyer.
Mhm.
And I say that's a bunch of nonsense. If you're going to be a lawyer, do
Mhm.
your job. If you
Mhm.
see something unjust going on, you should not be at all considering the political ramifications of it or even professional ramifications of it. Stand up and defend the person who was unjustly treated
Mhm.
by the corporate. So I don't give the lawyers a pass on that. Their job is to actually do it. Their job is not run and hide from it. If that lawyer isn't worth a nickel. If that lawyer is afraid to walk into a court and stand up for your rights, that lawyer should be in another profession. That lawyer
Mhm.
should not be a lawyer. And they're all over the place. I've
Right.
heard that from a lot of people, what you just said to me here. Uh, and then just the cost factor involved, on all of this stuff. And what is this stuff with lawyers? I mean, here where I'm at, kind of the going rate from what people are telling me when they're hiring lawyers. This is in Indiana now,
Mhm.
just a conservative state here. Uh, Rate is $270 an hour here. That's what most of the people are telling
Right.
me they're being charged. I've read stuff about these fancy swanky lawyers, uh, where they're getting like $1,200 an hour.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm okay with paying a doctor who saves a person's life.
Uh,
That
yeah. I
I
mean,
am I still on the screen here? Something
yeah, you
happened
are.
here.
I see you.
Okay, something's going on here, so I can't see anything. So, but you can hear me though, correct?
I can see and hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, and who in the world decided that these people need to be paid that kind of money? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, that's absolutely ridiculous. And who
Yeah.
can pay that? Who can afford that? And see, these corporations and these government agencies, they know that. Well, we can screw these people over because they won't be able to fight us anyway. They won't be able to afford it, which is actually true in almost all the cases. So that's another big problem that we're having in the country. Justice comes at a price, and if you can't meet that price, you get no justice. That's
Well,
how that's how the system is set up in the
e-
United States.
exactly, because when I went to run as a pro se, my own family court hearing for 50-50, my sons wanted 50-50. So I ran this case. I went to the conciliatory office and met with the referee, and the opposing attorney showed up, and he did not like what I was presenting, which was neglect and whatever I was presenting. And he stood up, slammed his briefcase, and said he was tired of all this ridiculousness. And he stomped out of the office. And the referee looked at me wide-eyed and said to me, "This is about the children." I said, I know, and then I left. And then she did grant the hearing. So I thought, this is great. My kids wanted to be subpoenaed and put on the stand. I subpoenaed everybody and their brother. We were ready to go. And as it turned out, the kids did not show up. Uh, there was a new judge on. He was pulled out of retirement. He looked like he was 90, but I think I looked up his age. I think he was 70, but he looked like he was 90. And in the meantime, the opposing attorney asked for $1,500. I'm like, I didn't even entertain that. I don't even know why he was asking for $1,500. And he did not send me a bill. So when I sat down and this judge pulled out of retirement and said, "Well, did you pay Attorney Black $1,500?" And I said, "Well, no." He says, "Well, then I'm not going to entertain this case. We will keep everything status quo." He got up, walked off the bench. I stood up and yelled, "Your Honor, my children are being neglected." Went to pick up my kids that evening, and they said, "Mom, was there a court today?" I said, "Yeah, where were you?" And my kiddo said to me, "Well, Dad told us that, it was called off." And I said, "No, no, it wasn't. We were all there. We were all there waiting for you." And the thing is, the attorney actually wanted an appearance fee, like he's J-Lo. And it's like
Right.
he's not getting an appearance fee for attending a conciliatory conference where he was supposed to be. And I asked where his client was, because shouldn't that be important to Dad to know why I'm coming for a, custody hearing. I was only going for 50-50. I wasn't demanding full custody. I wanted what the kids wanted. But no, he said, well, this is costing dad this could cost his, dad his job. It's like, well, that's what you guys did to me. But you have no problem. It's just all corrupt down to the bottom. Oh, another fun fact was that the opposing attorney chipped in $1,000 to that judge's daughter's judge campaign. Boom.
There you go. There you go. Money and politics and
Yes.
favoritism. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely sickening to hear.
Yeah.
And the thing that came into mind as soon as you brought up the fact how the judge asked about whether the lawyer was paid or not, immediately my thought process is, first of all, that judge should not even know anything about any financial considerations that are taking place. That's between the client and their lawyer. So why is he so interested whether or not money was paid? So here's what I would say about that. I would be concerned that if I know a judge is inquiring about whether money's been paid to the lawyer, is any of that money possibly being funneled into that judge's pocket? I have very serious feelings about that issue. About judges receiving bribes and so forth in cases. And the more I've been learning about family court cases, that might be the worst place where that type of thing is actually happening. As you just said with the judge even bringing it up. I mean, I've read the cases where judges have been caught with taking the bribes in those types of cases and so forth. But on many times they don't go to prison. They don't go to prison. They just they resign from, they give up their law license, they resign from the bench, and they go their happy way. All the money that they pocketed, they keep it, and they just resign. So people that are stealing money, they go to jail basically when you get caught. If a person walks into a store and steals a candy bar, he's going to get handcuffed. He's going to go to jail, and he's probably going to serve some jail time, maybe 30 days or something. But judges, when they're accepting bribes, oh no, that's, in the United States of America, that's a protected type thing. We can't ask questions about it. We have our secret society that protects the judges, and that's how it works. Graylord, again, proved it. It's not something that I'm throwing out here. Graylord in Cook County, Illinois, proved that years ago that that's happening. That's sad.
Right.
That's sad.
See,
and people are losing women. I think for the most part, I think the mothers are the ones that are getting the royal shaft in the courts for the most part. Now, there are some times when it's the father as well. I mean, there are some instances that happen like that, but I think for the most part, it's with the women. Usually they'll have the lawyers are pretty much males. The judges are pretty much males. The woman comes in, and then the husband, who is the so-called breadwinner in the family, the worker, and the mother who stays home with the kids and actually raises the kids, gets the short end of the stick, gets treated like a second-class citizen. That's what I've been seeing.
Right.
And that's sad.
You've said that. I've had two other male guests on my show that have said the same thing. They said, one other gentleman said that the pendulum has swung back, like, back in the 70s and 80s, Kramer versus Kramer, that movie. And then, they were going after the dads. So the judges have decided, well, let's swing the pendulum back and let's go after the mothers. So that is what's happening now. A lot of guys will disagree. I have a friend he's getting the shaft, and I've had him on my podcast multiple times. Jim Schock, he is getting totally royally screwed over, but hopefully the tide will be turning for him, because I am rooting for him. But generally I agree, they are going after mothers completely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can remember. I'm 71 years old, so I've been around for a while, and I can remember back in the day when it was like that, when it was the tide's just absolutely turned for sure. And there's no question about it. The mothers are getting the short end of the stick, and it was the other way around back in the day. And that's not fair. That's not right. And it shouldn't matter. What should matter is the best interest of the kids. What is in the best interest of the kids? And the best interest of the kids is not the judge asking if the lawyer has been paid his money. That is not, I will go out on a limb and say that is not in the best interest of the kids.
Right. And the thing was, the prior judge who died. Now, wait, moment of silence. Judge died.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so moving on, he had acknowledged that $1,500 to be paid. Then he died. Now, the thing that I found unusual was on March 2nd of 2015 is when that judge removed my kids from me. He died approximately a year later. March 2nd of 2016 is his date of death. Now, if that isn't God dealing with someone, I don't know what is. But he wrote that order. I don't know if it was signed. I'd have to go back and look. But that next judge wanted to know if that money was paid. But the point is, there was collusion with the opposing judge and attorney because they were BFFs in the DA's department for years. I don't know where they came up with the $1,500 figure, though.
Why in the world would that issue even come up in court, in a courtroom, and particularly by a judge? What that goes, when these judges that do that, they should immediately be banned from the bench. Mm-hmm. In any kind of case, when a judge comes out and he starts asking questions, hey man, have you paid your lawyer here? I need to know if you paid your lawyer because I got to get my payday too. That's what that's all about. I'm sorry. Yeah. That's what that's all about. 100%. I'm saying it. These judges are on the take. And that's why there's something that I believe should be happening that I know is never going to happen because the system won't allow it to happen. I believe that judges should be required to take a yearly polygraph test, a lie detector test. They have to take one every year to stay on the bench. And all you got to do is ask them a couple of questions. Mm-hmm. Have you had any ex parte conversations with either side of any case? Ex parte meaning out of the presence and knowledge of the other side in the case. Have you discussed this with either side, with the lawyers or the parties? If the answer to that question is yes, that judge needs to be removed. Have you ever accepted any money, a bribe? Have you ever received any money under the table for a case? That's a fair question. Mm-hmm. And if you're honest and you're a clean judge, you shouldn't have any problem with answering that question. Right. No, I have never received a bribe to fix a case. Real simple. Right. But they won't allow those questions to be answered. I wonder why.
Oh, and they should be doing random urine drug screens, and they should be doing Gavel probably every year and a half.
Absolutely. We don't know if these judges are, we don't know if they're under the influence of alcohol,
a lot of them are,
drugs, whatever kind of drug.
The judge that died, that I had, he died of pancreatitis.
Well, unfortunately, we don't want people to get ill, but when something happens and a judge dies and there's a problem that maybe could be traced back, where you could see where there might have been, some kind of, if there's a liver disease or something like that, there's a very high probability that probably alcohol is, we don't want judges walking into courtrooms that have been out on a drunk the night before and get in at 2 o'clock in the morning and sleep 3 hours and then come to court. We don't want that. And the only way to safeguard against that is to test them. That's the only way we can do that, as you said, Marianne. But, that won't happen because the powers that be won't let it happen.
Well, if they have to drug test policemen, nurses, doctors, firemen, these are people that play with other people's lives. These judges are seriously playing with people's and their children's lives.
Absolutely. And in fact, a lot of these things have actually been litigated in court. Civil rights groups will come in whenever drug testing comes into play in certain areas of corporations and so forth. There'll be major lawsuits filed, and then judges have repeatedly have repeatedly affirmed corporations and governments' rights to drug tests and even give polygraph tests as well. The courts have said that's fine. You can do that as long as you don't do it with us. You know, we should not have to answer questions whether we're coming to court in a drunken stupor. We shouldn't have to answer questions revealing that they're alcoholics and drug addicts. But the regular people in society, they must answer those questions, but not judges. And that's why we have such an infected system. We
Yes.
have people making, in high places of power, and a judge is in the ultimate place of high power. And probably that's where drug testing and polygraph testing should begin, actually, is in the judiciary and on the way down, not on the way up.
I'm also questioning if they are sociopathic in nature. That's why I would like to see the psychological evals on these guys, gals.
Well, I'll tell you, honestly, if there was a psycho evaluation of these judges, a lot of them probably wouldn't be there. Probably the majority of them wouldn't be there. I mean, their heads are so big, blown up with power that when I walk in, everybody has to stand
Yeah.
and reverence to me and call me honor,
While they wear a
your
Halloween
honor.
costume to work.
It's a costume. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. I'm glad you said that, Marianne. That's exactly what it is. It's a costume. That's all it is.
I should have saved my graduation gown.
Yeah,
Ugh.
and in fact, this is the costume right here. It's on the cover of my book, which is titled "Rogues in Black Robes,"
Yep.
which is a costume. It's there to make them look impressive. It's also there. There it is. You have to bow to that because it's a black robe, and it's an intimidation tactic. It's there to scare people.
Yep.
That's the only place you see that. And there's a reason for that. They could come out in a suit and tie.
Uh-huh.
They could come out in a suit and tie. They're just making rulings. They're just, they're lawyers is all they are. I mean, come on, they're lawyers. They weren't born into this special, they didn't come out of a judge womb. They came out just like everybody else did. And then they got a law degree, and then they had political connections, and then they end up on the bench. It doesn't matter whether it's state or federal, it's the same thing. Those are basically politically appointed jobs. That's what they are. To be a federal judge, you have to have the U.S. senators in your state sign on and recommend you to the president. That's how they get there. And then there's this big Federalist Society situation that takes place. I don't like to bring politics into play, but the Republicans actually, they had a game plan and it works. They have the Federalist Society working for them, and they pick and choose who the judges are that are going to be out there screwing the people and helping the corporations and the government agencies, and they're getting them on there. We've got them on there now. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And we need to stand up and get some decent judges on there. We do have one now on the Supreme Court. Katanya Brown, the most recent one that got on there. Boy, she has no problem in pulling any punches on this stuff that's going on. She's calling these people out for what they are, for the basically the criminals that they are. She's publicly stating it in her dissents. She doesn't like it. And we got a couple other good ones. Sotomayor, Kagan, I think, is a decent judge. But boy, we got some creepy ones on there for sure. I mean, on down the line. And we as a country are suffering for it badly.
Yeah, it's a rampant disease that some people say, well, this is a broken system. No, they know exactly what they're doing. These judges don't need to be educated. They know all about domestic violence. They know all about parental alienation. They know exactly how to use these tactics, twist and turn them to their own false narrative. They know exactly what they're doing. This is a well-oiled, fine piece of machinery that they've been keeping going for I don't know how many decades, since the 60s.
Well said. Well said. You're exactly on point there. I call it a secret society. And, it's going to stay that way. The one thing that's missing is citizen input. If we had regular people on these boards that actually make rules and so forth for the judges, instead of just judges making the rules and lawyers making the rules, the judiciary affects people. It's not there to create a job for the judiciary. The judiciary is there to make sure that problems that happen in society get justly resolved in a fair manner. That's why they're there. And society is the people. That is what society is. It's the people. But yet the people are removed from the process. If regular people were, for example, when you file a judicial misconduct complaint against a judge, whether it's state or federal, there should be regular people on those boards reviewing the complaint, not just judges. It should be regular people. Regular people can, if a person sees a person robbing a bank, that person doesn't have to be a trained police officer to figure out that the bank is being robbed. You don't have to have special training for that. And you don't have to have special training when a person, such as in your case, when the judge is asking, have you paid the lawyer the money yet? Tell me if you paid the lawyer yet or not. It doesn't take a special trained legal mind to figure out what's going on there.
Right.
If a regular person was on a review board that had that information, that person would say, hey, hold on here. This isn't right. And we're going to do something about this. This judge has got to go. But unless we get regular people, and that's possible, there's no law, there's no statute that states we are going to prevent the regular people from participating in this review process with judges. There's no law that states that can't happen. It can't happen and doesn't happen because that's how this infected system designed it, just how you said a minute ago. And that's what has to change. If I was on one of those boards, there would be I'd be asking a whole lot of questions about things that those judges wouldn't even appear. They wouldn't want to appear because I would have a whole lot of questions that I wouldn't be afraid to ask. And I might be, if I was the only person and everybody else was judges, I would be probably the only one that would recommend removal from the bench. But that's how it would be. This stuff about just having, it's unified. Okay, brothers and sisters, we got to take care of each other here. This is our friend. We've served with him, or he's part of our club, our society here. So we have to take care of it. That's all this stuff is. I mean, people need to wake up and smell the coffee. That's what's going on.
Unless it happens to them, then they will wake up and smell the coffee.
Sure.
That's the only thing that's, some people, are lucky enough to live their lives and skate by without having to see a courtroom. God bless them. I envy those people. I said to the electrician who was in our house, he was doing something to a lamp or a chandelier thing, which whatever it is. But I said, I wish I had your mind. And he said, why? I said, you've never been in a courtroom. I said, I wish I had that freeness of,
right.
Not thinking of this stuff.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's just horrible. It's mind-boggling to. I wish that honestly, I wish I didn't have to know what I know today.
Yes, thank you.
I know what I know today because of my own personal experiences. This is not something that I revel in, and it's just something that I believe is necessary. I don't have to do this. I'm 71 years old. I'm retired, but I don't want to go, before I die, I want to see some change taking place here because I know what I went through in my own life when I had dirty judges involved. And I was battling stuff here in Indiana. I mean, they were trying to take my freedom away from me. And I fought and stood up, against, stuff that was going on with rogue police. We see a lot of stuff these days in the news, but back when I was going through all of it, there were no cell phones and things. So I was going through a whole lot, and I learned a whole lot about judges and lawyers and things and how they operated. And then I learned the law to a certain extent, so forth. Started representing myself, so I saw firsthand through these eyes exactly what's going on, and it's very corrupt. Very corrupt. I saw a lot of it in my own cases. I've written about it, and it just that's my mission now. I want to effect some change. If I could just get one rule changed, I feel that I would have served my purpose in society here. We need to do this. We need to do this, and we need to have people get on board here and do these things. And Marion, if I could, I would like to, if people, I have done a lot of writing. I mean, I've written 2 books, and I'm not on here to sell books. I'm out here to get information out. I'm just making a point. I've written 2 books, and in addition to the 2 books, I've done a whole lot of writing. I've written letters to the editors, guest columns, op-eds. I have a blog that I'm writing. It's on my website. If people will go to my website and they can see all of the writings that I've done. I write about a lot of different things that we've been talking about here today, and some things we just don't have enough time to talk about everything, but there's a lot of stuff. If people want to read it, I talk about, how the Supreme Court of the United States, in one of my writings, it was an op-ed that was published in the Washington Examiner, as a matter of fact, about how the Supreme Court actually, the U.S. Supreme Court actually has a rule. They have a written rule that they do not allow pro se litigants to argue cases in oral argument in front of the Supreme Court. So pro se's, people that are representing themselves without a lawyer. So to the Supreme Court, it doesn't matter what the issue is. What matters is if you have had the resources to hire a lawyer. That's what matters. If you don't have the resources, then you don't get to come and argue your case to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is happy to take your money. It's very expensive in a lot of different ways to file a case in the Supreme Court. A very hefty filing fee. And then on top of that, they have these ridiculous, absurd requirements. In a regular court case, you prepare your brief, you put it on the copy machine, 8.5 by 11 sheets, and you file it. Real simple. In the Supreme Court, no, we can't do that. They require, it's an actual booklet. When you file in the Supreme Court a petition for a writ of certiorari, it has to be a booklet. It has to have a certain cover on it, a thick cover of some kind. It has to be bound, basically professionally bound, and it has to be a certain size. It's under 8.5 by 11, the standard size, and it has to be, and there's a certain typeset that must be used. In other words, you have to have it done by a professional printer, and how much that's going to cost. And on top of that, you're required to file something in the neighborhood. It's like 30 or 40 copies. You file a case in court, you file the copy, and that's it. You have to file these books. Can't remember the exact number, but it's like 30 of them. Okay.
Oh,
yeah. So you got to pay a printer. This stuff is very expensive. You go to a printer and have a special project done like that. But that's what they make it so basically impossible to even bring a case. And then they take your money. If you're a pro se, we'll take your money, but we're not going to allow. And I would say that the Supreme Court, the rule should be, we are requiring the pro se's to conduct their oral argument because they may not be able to state everything very accurately, that like a lawyer would in the written brief. So we need them to come in so we can ask them questions that we may not understand, possibly, that they were inartfully written, so to speak. So, but no. So it's just, think about it. That's discrimination. The
Mhm.
very court, the top court in the land that is there for the purpose of making sure that no discrimination exists in our country is discriminating against pro se litigants. We will
Mhm.
not allow you to appear in front of us in person, only with a lawyer, but we'll take your money. Now think about that. Why in the world? They're lucky that I'm not a lawyer, because I would have challenged that rule
Mhm.
long ago.
Mhm.
That is discrimination with a capital D. Absolutely. But that's the kind of court we have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't offer any, I like all your solutions, and they're, at least we're talking about solutions. If people would follow through with the solutions, that would be great.
Yeah, well, that's what it's going to take. It's absolutely going to take that. If people, I just, I urge the people, particularly on Twitter, and I know there's all these other social media things, platforms out there as well. I'm not real savvy with all the computer stuff, so I don't know what all of them are, but I know there's a lot of them.
Mhm.
And but I am on Twitter, and I see, so much on Twitter there, and I wish that people would take that energy and transfer it in a way that it's actually could have an effect. Every time when you sit in front of your computer all day and you're tweeting back and forth with other people that are experiencing the same thing, well, it feels good. You're able to cry a little bit on another shoulder and so forth. And we're all humans. We all do that. And
Mhm.
it satisfies a purpose. But if we would take some of that energy, say, you know what, instead of tweeting and complaining within this circle here, I'm going to tweet to the members of the House and the Senate Judiciary committees. I'm going to constantly tweet to them. And if 1,000 people would do that, if that member of the House or the Senate Judiciary Committee is receiving 1,000 tweets telling them, "Hey, listen, why aren't we having hearings about these judges? Look at what's going on here," and receiving letters and faxes and telephone calls, that's how change is going to come about. We have to have, the bottom line is, we have to put these elected officials on notice, and we have to exert pressure on them that we demand that action be taken. And there are ways for action to be taken, that nothing is happening that could be happening. And we talked about a lot of them here today. And in my opinion, that's the only way that we're going to change this. We got to demand it.
Mhm.
We're not just ask for it. That time is over. We
Yeah.
have to demand it. We have to do just like Rosa Parks. I'm not taking it anymore.
Mhm.
I'm sitting in the front of the bus. I'm not taking it. We have to be just like that.
And we have to do
And
this for future generations.
absolutely. And remember what John Lewis said. And neither one of us, you or I, Marianne, are on here telling people to go out there and do things, you know, illegal things, and that type. We're saying stay calm with everything, but be smart and utilize your rights. Now, John Lewis famously stated that get in necessary trouble, he told the people. If people know who John Lewis is, he just passed away not too long ago. He was an outstanding member of the House of Representatives. He
Mhm.
was involved back in the day in the civil rights movement and Selma and so forth. He said, get in necessary trouble. Don't go out and do anything bad, but sometimes we have to revolt a little bit in a
Mhm.
certain way. And we can petition the government. We can have demonstrations. We can protest. That's good trouble.
Mhm.
That's what good trouble is. That's what John Lewis meant. And I think we need to do that. We need to get in good trouble. You get in trouble when you stand up to a judge, people will say, well, you got in trouble doing that. Well, that's good trouble. That's what I mean by good trouble. Stand up to the judge. This is wrong. What you're doing here is wrong. Confront them with it in a business-like manner, and say, this is wrong. Call a spade a spade. Report the judge.
Mhm.
uh, Contact your representatives and report what's going on. Demand hearings. You may be perceived by some as a troublemaker. In fact, this Katie back in the day at an oral argument in a case, this Michael Caney, the one that I talked about earlier, that had a case fixed, he actually called me a troublemaker at an oral argument, which is actually against the judicial canons. They stayed in there about you have to be professional and courteous to litigants and so forth. He called me a troublemaker, but you know what? I had I had some friends there with me as well, and my brother was with me, and they thought I took that as a badge of honor. If this just corrupt judge called me a troublemaker, that's a badge of honor to me. A good judge isn't going to call me. A good judge is going to say, he's got a point. He's got a point. A bad judge is going to call you a troublemaker. And that's how a lot of people sometimes unfairly perceive people that are actually standing. Was Rosa Parks? I'm sure a lot of people called her a troublemaker. I'm sure a lot of people during the suffrage days when women wanted to vote, those are just troublemakers out there. Like John Lewis said, get in good trouble. That's what good trouble is. You may be perceived as a troublemaker by certain people, but those people are the ones that we're not trying to convince. We already know where they're at. We're trying to convince these people that need to be convinced. We demand change, and here's why. Do it. That's what good trouble is.
And be persistent.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't just do it once because they blow you off.
Right.
When they will just, I guarantee you, they just blow you off. You have to, as you said, you have to be persistent. You have to do it over and over and over again until it gets uncomfortable for them. Make it uncomfortable for them. Hey, see, these elected officials, they don't like to see their name in the paper when it's something written bad. They love it when people will say good things with interviews and so forth, but they hate it when they open up the newspaper and they walk into the office and their aide says to them, did you see the letter to the editor in our local newspaper today? No, what was it? Boy, they blasted you. They will immediately read it. They see that several times, and you know what? I got to do something here. I can't have people writing about this all the time. That's good trouble. That's what good trouble is, and that's what people need to do. I'm telling you, write letters to the editor of whoever that representative. See, they're always in Washington, the senators and the representatives. But remember, they all come from all areas of the country. So when that representative from California is in Washington, D.C., that representative is actually from somewhere in Los Angeles or San Francisco or somewhere in California. So that's the local paper you want to write to. Wherever that representative is from, his home district, write to that local newspaper. I guarantee you, if you send a letter, they may just rip it up and throw it in a wastebasket and not even read it. Okay. But if they see something that you've written in a letter to the editor, they will take notice of it. And if enough people will do that, that's a great starting point. And it costs nothing. You submit it online to the newspaper. It doesn't cost a penny to do it. And it's so effective. People are just missing the boat with it.
Yeah.
Just as I said, if people want to go on my website, they can see the writings that I've done. I've written some. I really taken the task with it. I put it in there, and in fact, I can tell you this. Back in the day, when I was dealing with all the stuff that I was dealing with police and so forth, I wrote a guest column it was in the Post-Tribune, which in the area that I live in here in Indiana, it's a dominant newspaper in the area. It's called the Post-Tribune. So there were people were dying in this jail. It was a particular jail that these rogue police kept taking me to. And by the way, it was 10 times, and I lost each case. I battled them each time in court and won each time. Nothing stood for them. So I wrote this particular jail, the Porter County Jail. People were dying. They were saying they were hanging themselves and so forth. So I wrote a guest column about it in the Post Tribune, which was a lot of it was a dominant newspaper. And then I found out through litigation later on that the FBI actually intercepted my article, my guest column piece that I wrote, and they faxed it to the office in it was either in Virginia or in Washington D.C. They actually faxed it there. They said, "Hey, look at this guest column that Vukadinovich wrote." Okay, and I wrote about the question about why are all these people, the jail needs to be investigated with all the, because I know what I saw when I was in there. So that was the subject matter of my guest column. So I was trying to put pressure on the government to investigate what was going on in the jail there. Why are these people dying in there? But the FBI picked up on it right away. And to me, it was Big Brother watching like, like, I'm like, you know what? I can't write something in a newspaper without the FBI zeroing in on it like that. So, but what that says is, when you put something in a newspaper, when you write a letter to the editor or an op-ed, they're watching. And I just gave an example. The FBI was watching it and thought enough that we better send this to our main office in Washington, D.C. So write letters to the editor. Write them. They're extremely effective. I cannot stress that enough. They're extremely effective, and they cost nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do it. Your representatives, write letters to the editor, demand, contact them. If you don't hear from them, if they blow you off, write letters to the editor about them.
Yeah.
About them, not just necessarily about the judges. Hey, I wrote to my congressman. My congressman is blowing me off. He doesn't think this issue of judicial corruption is important. I wrote to him, but he won't answer me. Write about them. And do it in their local newspapers. If you're from St. Paul, Minnesota, and you're represented, and that's the district you're in, and you got judges in that particular part of the country who are doing bad things, contact your representative there. He's not always in Washington. He's there a lot. Okay, ask for a meeting with him. If they don't want to give you a meeting, or if he doesn't want to act on your behalf, write a letter to the editor about that representative. Do it. Everybody should be doing it in every state of the country here, at every level, state courts, federal courts, state representatives, federal representatives, House members, senators. Write letters to the editor about all of these people. Contact them. Tell them you want action taken. Contact the House and the Senate Judiciary members. Tell them you want action taken. Tell them you want hearings. Tell them you want them to review the evidence that you have. And when they blow you off, and they probably will, then write letters to the editors about those people. Get it out there. Let's get this movement going. Let's do like what John Lewis said. Let's get in good trouble here with this thing. Put these people on notice.
Right. And also, go on Google reviews. If your attorney behaved badly, write your complaint on Google reviews, put up a couple transcript pages, highlight it. I mean, don't put up the whole transcript, but parts of the transcript that are, poignant, and highlight it. And you can post pictures up there on Google reviews as well, so everyone can see.
Absolutely. If you go on Google, there's some pretty decent organizations out there right now that are actually doing that function. They're putting I think one of them is called Injustice Watch, I think it's called, and there's several other ones. But you can, they actually have the stuff on there. All you got to do is send it to them, and they'll put it right on their websites for people to see. Hey, and by the way, when you file a complaint against your lawyer, every state has a so-called disciplinary commission of some kind, and usually it's with the Supreme Court of that state, and they'll have an arm of the Supreme Court in that state where their function is to oversee the lawyer conducts and so forth. So when you file a judicial or a complaint against a lawyer for whatever reason, and you get blown off, and in all likelihood you probably will, as you said about going on and putting that stuff online so people can see it, you can go even a step further and go online and see who the officer is who's in charge of that office. I mean, every state has got their justice who's in charge of the Supreme Court. We all know who that, in your state, who that is. That's easy to find. But there will be a person designated in charge of that disciplinary office, the arm of the Supreme Court. you can contact that person as well and express, your dissatisfaction that you blew off the complaint or whatever. And you can write a letter to the editor about that person as well. As an example, we're probably getting short on time here, but as an example, at the federal level, there's what's called the Administrative Office of the United States Courts. So they have a person in charge of that office. Her name is Rosalind Moskoff. Okay, she was appointed by John Roberts. So all of the stuff that goes on, the judicial misconduct complaints and so forth, her office is in charge of overseeing what's going on out there. Okay, so here's what I did. When I filed my misconduct complaint against Michael Caney, for case fixing that was swept under the rug, that was revealed by another federal judge in that circuit, Richard Posner. They swept it under the rug. It's sitting there right now without a decision in front of the Judicial Conference of the United States. I have written, and you can see this on my blogs if people want to look at it. The example I was just saying, contact the people that are in charge of those offices. I contacted Rosalind Moskoff. I said, hey, listen, what's going on here? Why is my petition sitting there in Washington and no action being taken on it? Explain that. So she doesn't want to respond to that. She does not want to respond to that. Okay, that's what they do. That's what they do. So I responded in kind by writing about her on my blogs. I explained to the people, look what's going on in Washington, D.C. This appointee, appointed by John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, Rosalind Moskoff, he will not answer why my petition for the case fixing that's going on at the Seventh Circuit is being swept under the rug. Why is it just sitting there with no ruling? They are so concerned about my petition that they are afraid to even make a determination on it, because they saw that the Seventh Circuit made a determination without a determination on the merits. When the Seventh Circuit swept it under the rug, they didn't get a denial from the case fixing judge. They didn't even get a denial from him on the record. They did not even speak to the judge who reported it, who disclosed it, Richard Posner. So I have all that in Washington, D.C. right now, and they're afraid to touch it. So what I did, she wants to blow it off. I'm not going to let her blow it off. Read my blogs. I wish people will go on there and they can read that. I wrote a couple of them about that alone. People can use those as a model. Here's how Vukadinovich wrote his. This is how I'm going to write mine. They could actually use them as a model. How I stated it. Just be truthful about what you write. I have people ask me all the time, aren't you afraid about getting sued by these judges? Not at all. Not at all. I'm not afraid. If they want to sue me, they can sue me. If they want to go into court against me, and I've made a statement about it, I don't make any statements that I can't back up. The truth is a defense to slander. If things may sound bad, but if they're true, there's no slander. The truth is a defense to it. I don't worry about that at all. People ask me all the time, aren't you worried about getting sued? I don't worry about it at all. Not at all. I write about it. It's in my books. I call them corrupt by name because I think I can prove it.
Oh, yeah. And also highlight your docket, things in your docket that you want to put on the Google review. I've done that as well.
And put the case number on there so people can actually go in there and look, and you can point them to the case. And then actually most states now, I think probably all the states now, and the federal judiciary, you can go right online and you can look in everybody's cases and see filings and so forth. So man, there's a lot of ways to get information and so forth, and people just aren't utilizing it. I'm probably the weakest person on the planet with computer savviness. I'm not very savvy with all this stuff, but I know enough to be able to effectively do that kind of stuff. And most people, in the country are far, far more advanced than I am on a computer and could do a whole lot more than what I'm doing. Do it. Do it. We have to take charge of this. We cannot depend on an infected judiciary. And that's what we have. It's a secret society that protects itself and covers itself.
Right.
We have to take control. We have the power. We're just not using it.
And it's for the sake of our future generations. If people would
Absolutely.
look at it like that, and I'd like to have you back on again.
Be happy to, Marianne.
And
You have a great show. Be
oh,
very,
I
very
think
happy
you're
to.
great. I think you're great. But hey, don't jump off. Wait a minute. How can people reach you if they have any questions?
Okay, if they will go on my website here again, my email address is on my website. It's motion for justice, MOTIONFORJUSTICE @yahoo.com. And if they didn't write that down right now, they can go on my website and it'll be on there. They can find it on there and they can email me. And honestly, I make a very major effort to respond to everybody's emails. I truly do.
Well, thank you so much, but don't jump off. Salam the Gavel, the podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Brian Vukadinovich in the future here. And you can find my podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, and also please go to the site pleasedoyourjob.com and sign that petition. So thank you so much, Brian. Thank you.
Very welcome, Marianne. It was a pleasure.